cfarivar. I'm an Iranian-American journalist. I was born and raised in California. I currently live in Bonn, Germany. I just took the train up this morning. I work for Deutsche Welle. How many people actually here know what Deutsche Welle is? All right, everybody. Okay, good. So your taxes pay my salary, so thank you. I have a weekly radio program about European science and technology news. It's called Spectrum. If you listen to podcasts or you search DW Spectrum on iTunes or on the internet, you can find it and listen to it hopefully every week. Thank you again to these wonderful hosts, the Media Center, thank you to the Consulate, thank you to the Hamburg Abendblatt, and to the university for hosting this evening. I am the author of this new book, The Internet and Elsewhere. It is available after the lecture for 20 euros. I'll be happy to sign it for you if you're so interested. If you would like, you can read the first 15 pages for €0, totally free, on my website, which is internetandelsewhere.com. There's a 15-page PDF. You can download it and read it and share it and remix it and do whatever you want with it. If someone wants to remix it, please tell me, because I would. Okay, so how many people here use Facebook? Wow. How many people use Twitter? Okay, cool. And how many of you are students? Very good. Okay. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, I asked these questions just to kind of set things up a little bit. I'm obviously talking about the internet in Iran. Some of you may have heard of this term, the Twitter revolution. Have people heard of this? Raise your hand if you've heard of this. Okay, so basically everybody. How many people believe that that's actually true? Okay. I don't, actually. I don't believe that this Twitter revolution, this phrase Twitter revolution, is very accurate. One, because despite a lot of attention that it received in the English-speaking press and possibly also in the German-speaking press, you guys can tell me better than I can, I think that it's a misnomer. It's inaccurate to call that a Twitter revolution. Number one, Twitter is not used nearly as much as I think people give credit for. There was a study that was done by an organization out of Harvard University in the United States that looked at all of the tweets with the hashtag Iran election, which was very popular in sharing news about the election in June 2009. There was a study looking at the 2 million tweets that were sent during the month after the election, and it found that about a quarter of them were actually retweets, and that a significant portion of them were also people who only tweeted only one time. And also that a lot of those tweets originated from outside of Iran. So I personally don't feel that there's strong evidence to suggest that Twitter played a strong role in terms of within the country, in terms of organizing people. That's number one. Number two, I really don't like this term revolution. I think it's an accurate term that we can use with respect to the Arab Spring in terms of Egypt and Tunisia, in terms of revolutions with Arab governments. Those of you who have taken political science classes, I think you would agree with me when I would say that a revolution is truly a dramatic change in a political system. We talk about the American Revolution, we talk about the Islamic Revolution, the French Revolution, but I don't know that we can talk about a Twitter revolution simply because today, as was the case 2 years ago, the Islamic Republic still stands. The supreme leader is still the supreme leader, Ahmadinejad is still the president, the country functions more or less as it did 2 years ago. So I don't know that the word revolution is very accurate here. But it is true that a lot of people did use the internet to promote and spread and amplify, particularly through expatriate Iranians, members of the diaspora, children of members of the diaspora like me. I was amongst the people who was sending out lots of retweets and such. There were lots of very dramatic and very heartbreaking examples of things that happened during that time, during that period of unrest and violence. Most notably, many of you will know, there was a case of a young woman named Neda who was shot and killed on the streets of Tehran during the protests in June 2009. There were in fact 2 YouTube videos that are still available. You can choose. They're very graphic, and it shows in a very tragic situation her being shot and killed on the streets of Tehran, and that was spread throughout the world of the internet. But I think it's important to remember that Iran is a very complex country. It's a country that is not naive with respect to internet access. It is a country that is using the internet for its own purposes. And this is some of the things that I would like to touch on this evening. Is that this is important to remember when we talk about internet policy, not only from the United States government's point of view, from European point of view, and from a point of view of those of us, and I think most of us would agree that we generally support freedom online. We support freedom of expression in basically all of its forms. During the period of June 2009, there was, as I said, these websites, Twitter, Facebook. There were other ones, FriendFeed. There was another Persian language one. If there are Iranians in the room, they may know a website called Bolatarin, which is a website that means the highest. It's sort of like the website Dig, for those of you, for tech fans in the room. It's basically where you can submit articles and vote them in ranking and popularity up the website. That was used as a way to spread news. A lot of the candidates, even before the election, including Ahmadinejad, were using FriendFeed and other social media as a way to promote their message. So I think, again, this is something to keep in mind, that even those that most of us wouldn't agree with, even government conservatives, are using these tools to their advantage. Right? I find it kind of funny that the supreme leader of Iran, well, probably not him, but somebody from his office, so those of you who are on Twitter, you can follow at Khamenei_IR is the office of the Supreme Leader of Iran. He tweets in English and Persian, or his office does, every day, multiple times a day. It's very entertaining. If you want to see what they're talking about. President Ahmadinejad himself, or again, somebody representing him online, has a blog, which has existed for about 4 years now. It exists in English, in French, in Arabic, and in Persian. So he's obviously trying to cast a wide net. A few years ago, he had a blog post wishing people a Merry Christmas. In another post talking about his childhood growing up, and another post talking about Islamic theology, so he's kind of all over the place. But again, I bring these examples up just to talk about that Iran is not stupid when it comes to using the internet to promote their own message. You saw a lot of these protests and videos during the protest period, and of course there are people who are getting around the very pervasive censorship and filtration system. There's one of my favorite posters, like protest signs that I saw during this unrest post-election period from a couple of years ago, was a poster that somebody held up in Persian. It said, "God is with us, are you filtering him too?" Which of course refers to the internet filtration system that exists in Iran. So I wanted to take a quick step back. If that's kind of where we're starting from, this is, I think, events that are recently in our mind. I wanted to take a step back and just present a little bit of history of Iran and also of the internet as a whole. The internet was founded in the United States, and very close to actually where I grew up, in Southern California, at UCLA, the University of California, Los Angeles, in October 1969. The internet is quite old. The internet as we know it and use it and love it, the World Wide Web was developed a little bit later. I'll get to that in a moment. So the internet started in California in the late 1960s, spread globally as kind of this bizarre computer science project. We talked about Korea. There was a young Korean computer scientist who was present at that time and later helped to spread the internet to Korea in the 1980s. The Islamic Republic, the Islamic Revolution, of course, happened in 1979, 1980. I think most of us know this was the overthrow that removed the previous monarchy government and brought in the present Islamic government into power. Ayatollah Khomeini, the supreme leader at the time, the architect of the Islamic Revolution, of course, was the first supreme leader, the almighty authority in Iran. As that was happening, and as the Islamic Republic was kind of finding its footing in the world, it started sending out scientists into various parts of the world, and one of the scientists to be educated and have postgraduate degrees and collaborate with researchers. One of the people that they sent out was a guy by the name of Siavash Shahshahani, who was a computer science professor, a young computer science professor, and he was sent to study in Italy in the 1980s. And he was one of the first Iranians, it's hard to say if he was the first, but definitely one of the first Iranians to experience using the internet. And again, remember, this is the 1980s we're talking about. This is not, this is even before the World Wide Web, before browsers, before the way that most of us, I think, use the internet in our everyday lives. He was using it to share emails, to exchange information, to share scientific papers, things like that. He was studying in Italy, and when he came back, he really promoted at his institution, which was the Institute for Physics and Mathematics in Tehran, that they be developed for academic purposes, the connection, to have Iran have a connection to the internet. At the time, the IPM, the Institute for Mathematics and Physics in Tehran, was headed by a guy named Mohammad Javad Larijani. And for those of you who follow Iranian politics, the name Larijani carries a lot of weight. The Larijani brothers have various positions currently in the Iranian government. This guy, who used to be the head of this Institute of Physics and Mathematics, he is now I believe, the human rights advisor to the Judiciary Ministry in Iran right now. His brothers, they are all, the three brothers are the sons of a famous, well-known Ayatollah in Iranian history. And they're fairly well known in Iranian politics. But I find it kind of ironic that somebody who was an Islamic conservative actually was the one who approved the internet connection to Iran back in the 1980s. So, by the time we get to the 1980s, Iran is starting to get online. Actually, the very first connection from Iran that was established to the outside world was actually established to Austria through an academic network. During the 1980s, something else was happening in Iran, which was the Iran-Iraq War, which was an extremely violent, extremely tragic conflict between Iran and Iraq. Around 500,000 people died as a result of this war, and that's obviously a terrible tragedy. By the end of the war, by 1989, as things are continuing to move forward, you have the beginning of the World Wide Web. You have a British scientist named Tim Berners-Lee. Some of you may be familiar with this name. This is a British scientist working at CERN, the European Nuclear Research Center just outside of Geneva, Switzerland. And he created the World Wide Web, again, as an academic tool for scientists to share information. And this is what we now use every day, is the web, with browsers and links and images and all the rest. This guy created that in 1989 in Switzerland. And this was the end of the Iran-Iraq War at that time, at the end of the 80s. And again, I think it's important to remember that at that time the internet was very, very small. And as many of us, even here in Europe and in the Middle East and in North America, the internet community, I believe at that time, was only a few million. And it wasn't until, I think some of us, people around my age, may remember getting the first kind of commercial internet access by, let's say, the early, later 90s. I think that was probably true for most of us. So as Iran continued to evolve and there started to be more and more internet access available in Iran, something really interesting started to happen at the same time, by the, let's say, mid-1990s and later 1990s. There was a period initially in Iran where people could get online without any restrictions, without any filtering, without any surveillance, right? Before Iran, the Iranian government started to kind of figure out what was going on. There was an article published in Newsweek magazine, for those of you who read American magazines, in 1995. And it had this question that continues, I think, to this day, which is, once the mullahs figure out what's going on online, will they allow it? That was essentially the question that was posed. And I think that that's a question that continues to be debated now. Talking about the internet in Iran. Some of you may have heard of this term, the Twitter revolution. Have people heard of this? Raise your hand if you've heard of this. Okay, so basically everybody. How many people believe that that's actually true? Okay. I don't, actually. I don't believe that this Twitter revolution, this phrase Twitter revolution is very accurate. One, actually here know what Deutsche Welle is. All right, everybody. Okay, good. So your taxes pay my salary, so thank you. I have a weekly radio program about European science and technology news. It's called Spectrum. If you listen to podcasts or you search DW Spectrum on iTunes or on the internet, you can find it and listen to it hopefully every week. Thank you again to these wonderful hosts. Cfarivar. I'm an Iranian-American journalist. I was born and raised in California. I currently live in Bonn, Germany. I just took the train up this morning. I work for Deutsche Welle. How many people? The Media Center, thank you to the consulate, thank you to the Hamburg and to the university for hosting me this evening. I am the author of this new book, The Internet and Elsewhere. It is available after the lecture for 20 euros. I'll be happy to sign it for you if you're so interested. If you would like, you can read the first 15 pages for €0, totally free, on my website, which is internetofelsewhere.com. There's a 15-page PDF. You can download it and read it and share it and remix it and do whatever you want with it. If someone wants to remix it, please tell me, because that would be okay, so how many people here use Facebook? Wow. How many people use Twitter? Okay, cool. And how many of you are students? Very good. Okay. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, I asked these questions just to kind of set things up a little bit. I'm obviously